Hey everyone, welcome to episode 100 of New Slang. I'm your host, music journalist Thomas Mooney, and yeah, we have finally arrived at episode 100. And as you can tell, it's with country music legend Clint Black. I knew I wanted to do something special for this episode, and I had a short list of ideas and some names of artists who I thought would maybe be ever so slightly more difficult to get on New Slang. And if you followed me or this podcast for even the tiniest bit of time, you'll know how much I am infatuated with 90s country music, something that I've dubbed the Neon Eon. One day I'll write a book called that or something, so please don't try and steal that. So, Clint Black has long been one of my favorite artists. I remember hearing his songs like Killin Time, No Time to Kill, Like the Rain, A Better Man, Summer's Comin', and so on, so often while growing up. But really, it's been recently where I've come to really fully appreciate Clint as a songwriter and a guitarist and as an artist in general. And so as you'd expect, it was a slightly surreal experience talking with Clint for an hour about writing and recording all those songs. I really didn't know what to expect going in. I didn't know if he would be really interested in talking about all those songs from 1989 and what it was like during the 90s in country music, what it was like writing with people like Merle Haggard. But as you'll hear, Clint was just a joy to talk with. And obviously, more importantly, he was just incredible to just listen to. You know, it's one thing to have a lot of insight. That's kind of expected for someone to have insight and recollections about songs that you're a part of. But what I was kind of blown away with was how introspective and in tune Clint was about his experiences in country music. I think that what was really interesting to hear him talk about was about fame and those effects on him. You'd kind of expect the general and broad way of how fame can affect someone, you know, how it affects your time and family life. But what he also mentions is how it affected how he came up with songs. Before Killin Time, he could blend in and kind of be that wallflower to observe. But after you become a focal point and a public figure, it's so much harder to blend in. What that kind of meant was how he had to be a little bit more disciplined in songwriting and realizing where a lot of those songs came from. I'm not sure if most people really think about how fame and becoming a public figure can have an effect on the creative process. There's just a wealth of knowledge in this episode, so I won't take much more of your time in this intro. If this is your first time listening to New Slang, I'd highly appreciate you hitting that subscribe button at wherever you are listening. I release episodes twice a week with a diverse blend of rising up-and-comers and established songwriters. At any rate, they're artists who I believe need to be heard. Before we get right into the interview, I wanted to talk to you a second about podcasting and Buzzsprout. It feels like everyone has a podcast these days. It's been really great to see people use podcasting as a storytelling outlet and to find like-minded people. You may have seen New Slang take a really big jump this past year, and one of the main reasons has undoubtedly been transitioning over to Buzzsprout as my podcast host. They've really made all the quote-unquote unfun things about podcasting so easy. For starters, that's why New Slang is on every major podcasting platform now and why it's been so uniform and organized online. I've always enjoyed speaking with songwriters and bands and artists. That's a given. But now Buzzsprout has made it so much easier on the publishing side. So if you've ever been interested in launching your own podcast, I'd highly recommend Buzzsprout, which if you follow the link in the show notes, you'll be able to A, sign up with Buzzsprout, B, be given a $20 Amazon gift card, and C, help support New Slang. Again, that link will be in the show notes. All right, enough of the housekeeping notes. Here is Clint Black. Where I guess I want to start off with is one of my favorite records is obviously like your debut record, Killin Time. It came out just over 30 years ago. 30 years ago was last year, the 30th anniversary. Now, obviously, like those songs are 30 plus years old. You probably don't think about it in the as those years go by, but when you hit a milestone like that, what did you do? Did you kind of like have a little bit of a reflection moment just to kind of appreciate and go, wow?
Yeah, the wow factor is there. And my manager and I were talking about what do we do, to commemorate. And, he was talking about some events and things like that. And, I remember just thinking, I don't want to try to make too big a deal out of it other than to, celebrate, the milestone of 30 years in this business making music. And so for me, it became evolved into more of not about that first album, but about the entirety of that 30 years and what all I've done. And as I started thinking about that, I'd never wanted to do a live album. I really felt like they detracted from what a live show experience was like. And so I was against it anytime anyone brought it up. But I always record my shows we had Pro Tools out there. So I'm recording and I use those as, work tapes if I need them. But never thought of them as anything to put out. And then it hit me one day, if I were ever going to release a live album, this would be the time. And if this goes by, what's another reason to release one? And so I started warming to the idea. And I had, several approaches, one of which was, what if I did, all the songs off that album? And then I thought, again, it really is about the 30 years and not just looking back to that moment. So if I take songs, that I've been doing on the road, then maybe the best thing is just to take a snapshot of who we are playing those songs. Because half the band was with me when I, was making the demos and getting the record deal. So let's take a snapshot at this point in time, 30 years later, some of the songs from that first album and some of the other songs from the 30 years. And then it really started to feel good and right. And, I had my engineer pull some recordings and look for the ones that were the best technically, and we had a good night. And so we found and earmarked some songs and said, all right, well, let's make it about these songs. And then I said, well, if I'm going to do a live album, I want it to really be live. I'm not going to re-sing any of it. So we really have to find a good night and, where all of the gear worked and, no glitches. So we did that. And then there were only, there were two songs where the fiddle recording had been corrupted. And so I had my fiddle player just come in and do one pass just like he would on the road. And then we, replaced those parts that were digitally corrupted. And so it was a live album and real and authentic and all of that. And I felt good about it. But I had these two songs that one I'd written before I met Hayden, my lead guitarist, and who I wrote, half my hits with. And one other song that he and I wrote that would have gone on Killin Time were it not for Walking Away, which is a waltz, a 3/4. And so This Old House was 3/4 signature. So I didn't want to have two of those on the same album. So Walking Away beat out This Old House, and This Old House got pushed aside, and it got pushed aside again and again until it was forgotten. And I was looking back through everything over my career and all of the songs, and I found these two songs. And I asked my manager, I said, would it be weird to have two studio tracks on this? And he loved the idea. We all chewed on it for a while and decided that would be good. They're songs from that era. They could have easily been on Killin Time. but for other songs that went on instead. So let's do it. And that really was, I think, the entirety of what we did to commemorate this milestone.
Yeah, yeah. It's always interesting to. I feel like as a fan or as a journalist, we get the finished product, but like that's just like the tip of that iceberg of what was going on for that moment in time for the artist, And so like those other songs, the songs that ended up on the cutting floor or weren't recorded, or even just stuff that's was halfway finished, that adds so much context to that moment in your life. And I always love when artists will do that, go and revisit and show those other little moments that could have taken place in an alternative history.
Yeah, I've listened to those Beatles tracks where they're talking about either back then or they're reflecting on that moment, and I love hearing that. It's it's something I would probably do if this lockdown dragged on for much longer, I might get around to doing stuff like that. Sometimes I feel like I just don't even remember what in the world we were thinking when we wrote that song. So what am I going to say? And, but it's, for me, looking back, the things that I'm going to reflect on and remember, if you say 1989, the first thing that's going to come to mind for me is the craziest time of my life, trying to adjust to jumping onto a train doing 90 and maintaining, my sense of self and well-being. And, everywhere I went was an event surrounding me. And there were very few times in my life back then where it wasn't some kind of an event. If I had a day or a week off, which was rare, I wasn't going anywhere, doing anything, nothing but the couch. And so most of my life was consumed with trying to balance how I think of myself and how everyone is seeing me and treating me. And so I look back over those years, and I know it was harried and crazy, and I like to think I handled it well. But as I go from 89 to 95, I look back on 89 from 95 and I go, yeah, I wasn't handling it that well. It was crazy. And then, but now I'm handling it really well. And then when I look back on 95 from like 2000, and I'm going, yeah, I wasn't handling it that well. It was still crazy in 1995. And then, so now in 2020, looking back on all those years, I know just how crazy it was at times and how displaced, you can feel, where this is what I dreamed of and it's what I'm wanted to do and what I'm going to do and what I want to still do. But there's still a mourning for the loss of something that you used to have, whether you want what you have now or not. And I remember after Killin Time, I remember going back to my old neighborhood, one of my trips back home, Houston, and driving just by coincidence past a bar I used to play in as a soloist, just me and my guitar and no band. And I remember driving past that bar and going, oh, there's that. It was just a little dive in a strip center, and nobody in there cared that I was playing. And I remember the feeling. It struck me like realizing at that moment that I've crossed a line, that I'll never be able to go into that bar again and be the same person I was when nobody cared that I was playing. And there's a sense of accomplishment and a sense of loss all at once. And I know it's hard for anyone who's dreaming of making it in this business to probably understand how there can be any remorse, that goes along with your success. But it is like a death. I've always been the guy playing in the bar who's watching people and what they do and seeing what their behavior and looking for an idea for a song and all of that stuff. That was gone. And I knew it instinctively at a crossing. Going past that bar, I knew I'm in a new life now. And that life, it'll never be the same.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Like it's one of those things where, in a flash, you can't just go out to hang out with a buddy at a bar anymore.
Well, you can, but you're carrying new weights.
Yeah.
You have new responsibilities. It's not just you anymore. It's you and everyone's feelings you're going to affect if you don't treat them just right. And when you're in a bar, especially somebody who's been drinking all night, their definition of treating them right in mind might be a little different.
Yeah. It's, I've heard some people, like some fans say, that an artist is their job is quote unquote, that 90 minutes on stage or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's absolutely not the case. Because if you run into Clint Black at the grocery store, you have to be Clint Black in that moment too. It's not just the on stage or the show night or whatever. You're that person for forever from that point on. You have to have your quote unquote Clint Black, the artist.
Yeah, and there's no training for it. And there's a responsibility, if you care how people feel. And I mean, if I weren't anyone famous, I would still feel the same way. I don't like to hurt people's feelings. Mm-hmm. And if someone has loved my music and then suddenly they're meeting me for the first time, I remember when I met Clint Eastwood for the first time, how he treated me would have mattered a lot. If I would have caught him in the middle of walking from one thing to another, and then you look at it differently than how people you like treat you. You have a responsibility to their feelings. It's sort of a weird thing, but I think if you're someone who likes people in general, you'd never want to hurt their feelings anyway. And lots of people I've met are very, very reasonable. They understand that you can't stop and talk to them for 20 minutes. Maybe you have somewhere to be, and they appreciate any of your time. Thanks for stopping, and saying hi and let me telling you something. And then there are other people who and it's rare, who will not be satisfied with just a moment of your time. They will resent anything less than everything they want out of that moment. And that's when you really feel it's kind of crushing sometimes. And then it's my feelings, because I feel like there really isn't enough I can do for you to make you feel good. And so now I feel bad. I've had fans say or do something that made it feel like they weren't looking at me as a human anymore, or someone who they respected that I had to go from A to B, and I'm on my way to a doctor's appointment, and a quick hello is great, but I got to go, and they don't respect that. And so then, you really have to try extra hard to make sure you don't make somebody feel bad or dissatisfied with the moment, because then it starts to flow back on you. Now I feel bad, and it's a James Taylor. I'm a big James Taylor fan, and he has a lyric: "Fortune and fame, such a curious game. Perfect strangers will call you by name. Pay good money to hear fire and rain again and again and again." And, it's summer like summer, coming back every year. Got your baby, got your blanket, got your bucket of beer. I break into a grin from ear to ear, and suddenly it's perfectly clear. That's why I'm here. And I always set out to be an entertainer, make music people loved, and treat people nicely. But I never, I wasn't like Garth. I won't go 29 hours without peeing so that I care. I will go to the bathroom when my bladder's about to explode. I need you to know that. I will go to the bathroom when I really have to go, and assume that you're going to know I still care. So certain people appreciate that, and some people don't. And I asked George Strait once when I was just getting going. I said, "How do you do it? You're going in and you're playing for thousands of people, and you have to head out the door to the airport, and there's a bunch of people out back, and you can't stop. How do you go past them?" And I forget exactly what he said, but he had a great answer, and it was basically, you just have to do what you can for people when you have time, and, let it go.
Yeah. It's really interesting that something you said a minute ago about how it affected it can affect where you kind of get songs from. So many of your songs, you have that what I would call kind of like you've taken and put a spotlight on like the wallflower. Like I feel like a lot of these songs feel like you are very insightful to the people on the outside, their feelings, right? And so much of that is you can get from people watching, and when you go from being someone who's able to watch to being where that spotlight is on you, that I think it's incredibly insightful. Did you feel you had to like it changed the way you wrote songs, or did you just have to be a little bit more I guess careful, or like more attentive to where those moments came where you're able to people watch or get thoughts?
I sort of, I continue to be a student of human behavior. I still had lots of people around me, lots to witness. But I also, would read books. You read books, watch movies, documentaries. I would read psychology books, when psychologists would put out a book that would become a bestseller and suddenly everybody knows about it. Oh, I want to read that book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or something like that, Now I read that book, and there was a line in there where the author was suggesting that our relationships would be a lot better off if we treated love as a verb instead of a noun. So that went into my brain, and 5 years later out came, love isn't something that we have, it's something that we do. So mm-hmm. The observation kept going. It just, I was just in a different world looking out at it.
Yeah, that's one of those songs where I guess like when you growing up, I guess, I've heard it a million times, but then that one day where it really clicked, it clicked, and you're like, oh yeah, this is exactly what he's talking about now. And it's not just a good sounding
Desperado
song.
was that way. I sang Desperado in the bars for years, and then I recorded it on the Common Thread album, Eagles Tribute. Mm-hmm. And then I was out performing it on the road, for, crowds of thousands of people. And one night I'm up there singing it, and it was like, there's this new moment in my life where a lyric in that song that had always meant something to me suddenly means something else also, because of the context and the life I'm living now. And even songs of my own, I'll be singing on stage and trying to feel them. And something will pop into my head, and it'll be a new thought, a new look at my own thought. It's a funny thing.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how time, obviously attaches itself to songs, but then also kind of can help morph and change them. And, depending on the day you listen to them, you're going to catch something. And what I find incredibly interesting is when it does that with a songwriter too, is when they wrote it about this moment in their life, but then now they have a different feel to it, and they can still like feel that initial feeling, but then also like, oh yeah, this is what also this means too, or
Yeah, because we evolve, and the thing that popped into my head when you're saying that is, I think it was a Russian who said it. If you don't love it, if you're 20 and you don't love Russia or whatever, you have no heart. If you're 40 and you do, you have no brain. It was one of those things where, and it may have been about socialism or something, because we're young, we're idealistic. We see the way that everything can be. We know we have it figured out. And then you find out 20 years later, well, I didn't have it all figured out. And there's, it's called maturing, where I look now as a father at my own father differently. I understand things that he did more clearly now than ever, even though at the time I knew what he was doing and why he was doing it, why he was punishing me or whatever, why, he would or wouldn't let me have the car keys, whatever it was. But until you've lived a little more, you can only see part of it. I told my daughter when she was a lot younger, she's 19, but I told her when she was much younger, and I was trying to teach her something. I said, you're like if an alien was dropped onto this planet 9 years ago. So she was 9. I said, you're like if an alien was dropped onto this planet 9 years ago, and you're trying to understand how everything works, learn the language, learn what to watch out for, and all of that. And I was dropped here 58 years ago, or 50 years ago, whatever it was. I know my way around. I don't have all the answers, but I know my way around. And when I was dropped on here, it had been firing on all pistons for 100,000 years of civilization or whatever it is. And I said, so it's really important for you to stick close to and learn from somebody who was dropped onto the planet 50 years ago, because I've seen a few things and I can warn you about them and show you some ways to have a lot of fun, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that's kind of how you come to this evolution of, I don't see my song in the same way anymore. I have songs that I've written where I just don't even agree with what I said. I don't like what I said necessarily, or it just doesn't say it quite as well.
This episode is sponsored by the Blue Light Live, my all-time favorite music venue and bar. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult on small businesses, music venues, bars, and musicians. There are a handful of ways that you can help, though. For starters, go over to www.bluelightlubbock.com, click on the merch tab at the top of the page, and order yourself a Blue Light hat, t-shirt, and koozie. Second, if you haven't purchased Monday Night Lights, a 50-song compilation of Lubbock songwriters organized by songwriter and photographer extraordinaire Charlie Stout and myself, head over to www.mondaynightlights.com. The proceeds of this 50-song collection go directly to the bartending staff. We launched it a few months back, and we were blown away by the response and reception. And of course, if you're just hearing about it now, go ahead and get it today. This collection will never be on iTunes or on Apple Music, so the only spot you'll be able to get it at is at mondaynightlights.com. I'll throw both links into the show notes for easy access. All right, back to the show. Well, like, obviously, like, you've written basically everything that you've recorded. And I guess, like, I think for country music, for just music in general, you learn that there are songwriters who are out there who write songs, and there's really great artists who can translate that for the public and cover those songs really well. Obviously, here in country music, there is a lot of really great song interpreters. But when you dive into the liner notes, the one thing you notice with Clint Black is that he's written like 99% of the songs he's recorded. Was that ever anything that you that was something that you wanted to be a staple of your career, is that you were a songwriter as well as
absolutely, yeah. There's only one song that I recorded that I didn't write. If you don't count cover songs like Desperado, the Waylon song, or the Monty Python Galaxy song. Mm-hmm. Everything else I've written. One song I recorded around 2007 called The Strong One I didn't write. And the record company, my company, asked, let's do an experiment and let's just meet with the publishers and have them all pitch you a song and see if there's one song we could find that you would record as an outlier, And so I did it. But when I was growing up, I read the liner notes. My dad showed me, look, here's where the artist's name is, and here's the writer of the song, and here's the producer. Usually Billy Sherrill if it's good. And so that's, my dad educating me. And from that point on, I read liner notes, and I noticed sorry, hang on one second. Let me try to get this noise away. So I'm reading the liner notes, and I'm noticing that a lot of the artists I listened to wrote their own songs. James Taylor, Jimmy Buffett, Loggins and Messina, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings. Waylon recorded a lot of outside songs, and so did Willie. But the Eagles, and on and on and on. And I started to realize that I gravitated more toward them, and that's what I wanted to be. And then I remember before I got my record deal, I was listening to an interview with Reba, and she was saying, well, I listened to probably 1,000 songs to pick 10 for an album. And I thought, whoa, that sounds really hard. I thought, man, I don't know if I want to try to keep myself out of that position. It's if I can write them. And so when I got my record deal, I told Hayden Nicholas, I said, if I get my way, I'm going to get real busy really soon. So we need to start writing for the second and third album now. So as a result of that, every time I went in to make another album, I always had about 30 songs written. And that's how songs like This Old House and No One Here For Me get pushed aside, because new stuff's constantly coming in. And so I never had a shortage of songs. But when I got to around my fourth album, after The Hard Way, the record company started pressuring me to record outside songs. And, my attitude was, well, wait a minute, I think I did a pretty good job on the other ones. And, I didn't understand. And so I didn't. And I recorded the No Time to Kill album, and we had 5 hits off of that. And then I recorded the One Emotion album, and we had 5 hits off of that. And then I went in to cut 2 songs to have as additions to my first greatest hits album. And Like the Rain was one of them. And the head of the label didn't like my second verse. And I went to talk to Stroud, my co-producer, and I said, what do you think I should do? He said, you know what? He's the head of your record company, and it's so easy for you to write a verse. Just write another second verse. So I did, and I recorded that and sent it along, and word came back that he loved it, had my label. So I went in to talk to him, and I said, listen, I hope you know that I want to be, the strongest adhesive in this relationship. And I like the spirit of cooperation. And that's why I, wrote a new second verse. I said, but I need to understand why it's so important. The pressure to record outside songs had grown more and more and more, even with the hits, Bad Goodbye, Good Brother Bad Luck, State of Mind, No Time to Kill, Summer's Coming, all of that. I was having a lot of hits. And even in the face of that, the pressure for me to record songs written by Nashville, songwriters, etc., was growing. The pressure was becoming pretty intense. And I said, I just need to understand why it's so important. And he said, they just want a little taste. Mm-hmm. My heart sank. I thought, tell me my songs really aren't that good, even though they're selling something. But that this is about sharing revenue with publishing companies and writers in this town, and that's your reason to come after my life's work. Not good enough. Mm-hmm. So I didn't. I went on and I recorded Nothing But the Taillights album and wrote everything on it, and Delectrified. I did 4 cover songs and wrote everything else on it. And when I said I do, been there, had hits all along the way. And then whenever I left RCA, I met with a couple of major record companies, and they wanted to sign me. Really happy to, but not if I insist on writing my own songs. And so I did an independent record, and then some major labels wanted to sign me after that. And so I met with 3 different labels over about a 3-year period, each one going through like a courtship. And each time they wanted me and everything about me. And by the end of it, they said, but, if you just wouldn't insist on writing your own songs. And I thought, man, this is just your company, buddy. You can do with your company what you want, but no, I'm not signing up for any of this. So here I am today. I'm an indie artist. I put out my own records on my own label. I have a distribution deal with a subsidiary of one of the major labels. I don't have any kind of a promotion team out promoting my records at radio, but I'm doing the best work of my life. And that's, in the end, what I'll be most proud of, where the record sales and awards are exciting, and they bring a lot of revenue to the artists. If I had impacted my life's work for the sake of that, I would not be happy. I would not be happy today. Mm-hmm. And so I really had to, it was a great point of contention, but when it was really after my first album, they tried to get me to record some outside songs, and I said, I've got plenty. And I didn't hear anything else about it. But I thought, the guy who wrote that Killin Time album, probably you ought to let him keep his job. It's kind of the way I looked at it.
Yeah. Well, what it sounds like is at that point, it's not about, it's the commercialization of art, right? It's not about the actual art.
Commerce, yeah.
Yeah. And it just, that's the, I don't, it just sounds like, that's where you're at a loss, like those people have lost the forest for the trees, and, I always kind of look back at when talking with, friends who are young songwriters, and is like, in after this is all done, people are going to look at your work and realize, like, oh, this is, they're able to take it all at once and realize that there is I guess I have like one buddy who had a line about, his name's John Bauman, and it's, too late to quit, or too soon for accolades and too late to quit. And just kind of about, it's, at some point you'll get your accolades. At some point people will praise you for the stuff you've done, even if you think it's too late at the time, so.
Well, I appreciate that. I won't say his name. I don't, hadn't gotten his blessing to do so, but someone my brother knows, who's one of the all-time great songwriters, one I greatly respect, said, "Hey, I just decided one day that I was going to go through your brother's entire catalog and just see what kind of songwriting he has done." And his assessment was very flattering, and that meant more to me than any award. I really feel like it's the work that I enjoy, and the rewards wouldn't be nearly enough if I didn't enjoy the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too hard to make a record. It's 10, 12 hours a day, and it gets inside you like an earworm, and it takes over your life. And, I think about, Jackson Pollock, you get to a point where you're so consumed by it that I can't even stand in the kitchen and have a conversation, because the music won't stop in my head. And Lisa knows, after all these years, she'll go, "You didn't hear any of that, did you?" And I go, "No." She goes, "Go back to work," or whatever. It reminds me of a funny line where the wife says, "You're not listening to a word I'm saying, are you?" And I thought to myself, what a weird way to start a conversation. And it's a lot of work, and to dedicate that work to somebody else's work, I don't think I can't do it. I couldn't do it. I've been offered jobs, and television and movies, and I look at it and I say, I can't do that 10 hours a day. I can't. Would pay well, would put me in a good light, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
I'm still putting in hours and hours. I put in hours every day practicing on my guitar. I'll watch guitar lessons on YouTube and try to get my brain to see things I can't see. I'm still very, very active, very driven. I've learned how to engineer just about anything I want to engineer, except I still hire an engineer for tracking sessions and mixing. But I can run my entire studio, need be, and usually will. And I can do it 10, 12 hours a day. And, I cannot imagine. I can't imagine just saying, well, you can do half your job, but you can't do your whole job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned Hayden a few times, your guitar player. You guys have obviously written a bunch of these songs together, collaborated over the years, just in general. I guess, how has that partnership adapted and morphed over these 30 plus years?
Well, we're like brothers, we've lived together on the road for 30 years. We met 33 years ago. And it's like the family history, with my brothers. We don't have to educate each other on our family history. We were there, right? So when it comes to our life in this business and the body of work, there's a shorthand there. There not much needs to be said. I mean, if we started writing a song that sounded like another song we'd already written, we wouldn't have to say it. unless it was just like a, oh my, and I caught up before he did, or vice versa. So the other part of that is he's really my band leader. He makes sure that everybody's, happy. And if there's anything that needs to be brought to my attention, he will, or he'll tell them, you need to go talk to Clint. And, if anything, if I'm seeing something that I think is a problem in the band, I go to Hayden and talk to him first and say, what am I seeing? And why is that? Is it what I think it is? Is something wrong with him? Is there anything, and so it's just like most of those guys have been with me for a long time, and including my crew. And so it's like a family, and Hayden and I have managed that together for all these years. So aside from even the writing and the work and, the musical stuff, just making sure we have a happy, healthy, family out on the road, that's something that we've done together that I rely on him greatly for, and, including my own faults and flaws. I need to be careful about everybody's feelings or what their needs are, if I'm telling them enough or whatever. And, we just manage that together all this time. And so it's there's something that comes out of that that's, you can't really say anything. It's like a brother,
Yeah. Yeah. I like the, you saying the shorthand, like when you get to a point like that with somebody, it's just, I don't know, that's where the magic is, and, now like from I guess like an outside perspective, I guess like where, you read about Clint Black and you read about how you and Hayden, meet and he becomes your guitar player. And that's where really things just kind of click. Did it feel like it clicked in the moment? Like that was just, we're on to something now, or did it feel like it was going to be, stuff that did it feel any different in the moment, I guess is what I'm asking.
In the moment, it was clear to me instantly, wow, that guy on guitar, good Lord, he's amazing. And I'm going to, talk to him more, because I just hired this band to back me on one gig I needed to do in order to get a bunch of solo gigs out of this country club. Those solo gigs were going to pay really well, but I wasn't going to get those unless I played this banquet for this guy, booking them. And he wanted me to have a band. So I found a band. He was filling in for the guitar player that had just quit the band. And so I knew instantly I'm going to talk to that guy more, and so he and I gravitated toward each other. And what are you doing? What are you doing? And I was trying to make demos with no money, and he had an 8-track recorder in his garage. So we struck a deal to record those demos, and it was just instantly clear. This is how I'm going to find a manager, with these demos. And then when he said, "Oh, I write too," and he played me a musical thing, and I had just written a lyric the night before, I had no music for, and I said, "Play it again." And he played it again, and when he did, I sang, "Straight from the factory, we were made for each other. One of those things it's meant to be. Straight from the factory, nothing less than exactly. You're the only lock just made to fit my key." And it was like they just fit perfectly, like a lock and a key. And we both were looking at each other going, let's write that. So we wrote that, and then we started scheduling time to write and work on demos. And we first song that we finished demoing was "Nobody's Home." I found a manager. I knew he was a big time manager and that I was about to get a break. And so we started writing more. We wrote "Better Man," and "Killin Time" came later, right before we went in to cut, I think, the last tracks on that album. But we had written "Walking Away" and and some of the other songs on there, and some that would come later. And yeah, it was clear this is really, really working. And yeah, I really believe we're doing something here that people are gonna like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, it felt like you guys pulled so much out of each other. Like the tone of the guitars just really played well with your vocals and vice versa. And then you guys just were able to really echo what the words were saying in a song. And I don't know, like it just felt like there's just some magic was created in those moments.
Yeah, and Hayden, never ran out of ideas. I always had a real clear sense of what I liked and didn't like, and so I really learned the art of recording a demo with 8 tracks, and making the most of that. I learned that from Hayden, and then I started to learn, from James Stroud, and and then as we started making the record, I didn't always know the right language at the time, but I knew what I was liking and what I wasn't liking. Hayden had a library of things that he knew that guitar players had done for the last 50 years. And so if I was saying, it's not working, I really want something that's a little more swimmy, or I may use some line like that, and he would come up with some way to translate that into something he could do. It was his idea to use the Jerry Jones 6-string bass for Killin Time. He came up with that, and that was just like, wow, that really adds a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then he, years later would say to me, with your style of finger picking on acoustic, you really could play electric guitar and do some of this type of stuff. And he did some lick, and then I laughed, and I said, no, I couldn't. There's no way. And he goes, yeah, you could. And look here, just do this one step at a time. And he taught me some licks to practice on, and that really launched me into all of the guitar stuff I did on No Time to Kill. I played almost all the electric guitars on that album, and that was really Hayden. One day when we were songwriting and took a break for a minute to let our brains rest, and he pushed me into that and said, you could do this. You've got a style on acoustic. It would translate, onto the electric really well. And then all these years later, I'm playing stuff on electric guitar that I wouldn't have thought. I never set out to do it. I always just was singing and trying to play well enough to accompany myself on acoustic.
Yeah. Yeah. Opening the other creative outlets, I guess. Right. One of the things also like that I've always, I guess, noticed in your career is you're writing all these songs, you're writing a lot with Hayden, but then also, you have a lot of other collaborations with, like Steve Wariner, and you wrote a few songs with Merle Haggard. What were in those moments, like when you were writing with, people that were not with you from the beginning, or what did you learn from someone like Merle Haggard?
Well, I most of what I learned from Merle, I learned from playing and singing his songs and listening to him all those years. But a funny thing, it's like, if you ever meet Steve Martin, you'll recognize instantly why he's so popular. It's like you meet him and you go, God, I get it. He's Steve Martin, and there are people like that. And Merle is one of them. And that is when we were writing Untangling My Mind, he really had it was about half written. There was some gaps in there and all, but he wrote down what he had and made me a board tape of what he had and gave it to me. And then I worked on it for about 3 days and wrote down the lyrics as I had them now and sent it back to him through his tour manager. And the band and my band and I are sitting in the dressing room. Merle and I are on tour together, and Merle comes in, hey, how you doing? And he puts the lyric sheet down on the coffee table in front of me. And I said, what do you think? And he said, well, he said, just because of one word, I'd have to give it an A-. And I thought, the professor has graded my paper. So I instantly said, what word would you? I knew what it was. I knew what it was because it bothered me too, but I didn't have anything else. And I said, well, what would you have said? And he I think it felt like it caught him a little off guard, but he said, well, believing. And it was like, God, it's so obvious, it was so obvious. That was perfect. It was just like, you learn that's because he's Merle Haggard that he was able to do that, and also that, I felt like the song from what he and I had written, except for that one little spot, was really good, and that he thought so too, was another one of those, sort of the verifications, he's Merle Haggard, and I think I know what's good enough for Merle because I know his work inside and out, and I wouldn't have given him that sheet of paper if I didn't think it was good enough. And he verified that for me, and it just sort of becomes this, sort of the professor and the student moment that I'll never forget. There's a reason he's Merle Haggard, there's a reason we love Steve Martin, if you stood around and talked to Haggard for 5 minutes, it would be one of the best 5 minutes of your life. Same with Buck Owens, there's just people out there like that where you go, yep, it's what I thought.
Yeah. It has to be like that moment of like, I don't know, like you said, it validates in a lot of ways, right? And it has to be also incredibly humbling to realize, like that, he's validated your quote unquote your work, right? You've got the stamp of approval, but also at the same time, like, well, that means I gotta keep on working at this level, that has to be kind of an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I always felt like I don't want my work to be judged just by the fans. I don't want it to meet their standards. I want my musical heroes, if they look over at it, to say, that's good work. If Don Henley heard one of my songs, I would want it to meet his standards, or James Taylor, or, Willie. So getting a chance to work with someone who has meant so much to me, and do some work that they felt was, even almost complete. It was very, very, very satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, obviously, you've mentioned a whole lot of your heroes on the countryside. Obviously, you mentioned Jimmy Buffett and people like that as well. And you did do some collaborations with people like Bruce Hornsby. Like, I guess like that's like people often think of like those kind of guys like him and Kenny Loggins or Michael McDonald, like those as being in a different world musically.
Edgar Winter.
Yeah. Yeah. What, I guess like what, it doesn't feel like you were ever afraid to, collaborate with those kind of guys who may be, outside the quote unquote country realm.
No, because I love their music, and I also see the common threads. Pardon the pun. And I also know that there are a lot of people outside of country music who love country music. I mean, a lot of
Right.
these rock artists love country music, and so it's just like comedians. Just because you're Jeff Foxworthy, you may love Monty Python, even though you have this redneck shtick. You could love Monty Python. I love Jeff Foxworthy and Bill Engvall and Larry the Cable Guy, and I love Eric Idle and Michael Palin, those guys. And so the one thing that I think we all like to do, like Darryl Strawberry, I got to go play some baseball. Well, you're a football player. Yeah, that's right. I love baseball. I know. I mean, especially if you take guys like Kenny Loggins and, you look at the old Loggins and Messina stuff, there's stuff in there Anne Murray covered a couple of them, had big country hits on A Love Song and Danny's Song. So the common threads are there. We're all, part of the same fabric. And it really just depends on the individual. Did you hit it off? Did you want to stretch out? I want to stretch out and do something with a rock artist, and the rock artist wants to stretch out and do something country. The Eagles, plenty of their stuff would be right into the 90s country mold.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a real comfortable fit. It just then comes down to the individual. And there are people who are too weird to, just have coffee with. I just can't relate to this person, I can't. I've been around and worked with people where I'm trying to have a conversation, and I'm thinking, I don't think we're we're reading from a different book or a different language, and this is just this is really, really difficult, which makes you want to do it more in a one way. I got to figure out how to have this conversation. But when you do make those connections there, where you both seem to be reading from the same sheet music and on the same page, it's really exciting and real satisfying.
Yeah. Obviously you have this new record coming out this June, out of Sane. You mentioned working on, I guess, all the other aspects of being a songwriter or an artist, the engineering and the getting to be a better guitar player and getting to be, just all the studio aspects of that, of what goes into that too. I guess like on this new record right here, what have you, I guess like found that you've loved to do most, like as you've picked up all these little pieces and these tools to help become a better, more well-rounded artist?
Well, I'm finding I'm having to resist the urge to put slide guitar on songs now, because I picked up slide guitar on the previous album on purpose and played it on a record for the first time ever, and I love that. I really love it. It's an exciting new instrument, kind of, and so I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the process when it gets toward the end of there's what I call doing mutes, and that is going through and finding the spots where there's too much going on and something has to go. I really like getting to the point where I'm really refining what the band is doing at any given moment in the song, because we overplay, and especially when we're overdubbing. The idea is to overplay and just have fun and just do everything you could possibly come up with within reason. You know, you don't want to create too much work for me later, but you know, if it's me playing or somebody overdubbing fiddle or dobro or something, you know, give me everything you got for a few passes, and then let's hone in on the things that are really special and make sure they're just right. And then I'll have all kinds of other stuff. And once I get to a point where I'm now really starting having to decide who in the band is going to be playing at every given moment, so that there's no arm wrestling that bothers the ear. That's exciting for me, because it's when the real sound and feel of the album starts to take shape, and I really am able to start seeing, you know, hearing what my album is going to sound like, because it's almost always an experiment in trying to get what's in my head onto tape, and it'll never be just what I was after. You know, there's happy surprises and there's things I never quite worked out, but this is good too. And so, you know, it's, that's a fun part, but I'd say number one would be, you know, playing the guitar part.
This episode is sponsored by Wicker's Mesquite Smoked Jalapeno Jelly. It's owned and operated by my buddy Wes Wicker, who makes the jelly in small batches for the best quality and freshness. He smokes the peppers with mesquite and uses pure cane sugar to make the jelly. What you get is this great blend of smoky, sweet, and spicy. It's addictively savory. For those uninitiated, Wicker's is a great addition to any chef's kitchen. Part of what makes Wicker's so great is just how versatile it really is. For starters, it makes a great meat glaze. Throw it on a batch of hot wings, use it on some pork ribs, some pork chops, really whatever you can think of. Eat it on biscuits, cornbread, bagels, or toast. Throw it on a ham or turkey sandwich. Another super simple but effective way is to get some cream cheese, throw some Wickers on top, and then grab your favorite cracker. Wickers is currently stocked at a handful of places in Lubbock and on the South Plains, as well as some Fort Worth and DFW locations. But the easiest way to get your hands on a jar is to head over to wickerstx.com. That's WICKERSTX.com. I'll throw a link into the show notes for good measure. They currently come in two varieties, original and now hot, if you need just a little bit more kick in your bite. You can order anything from 1 jar to a case of 12, whatever fits your needs. Again, that's wickerstx.com. Okay, back to the show.
Yeah. You know, this record right here, I've listened through a few times, and you know, I think what's such an important aspect of an artist is when an artist still has something to say. And sometimes, you know, artists can lose that momentum or lose what they, I guess, like they're that guiding light or something like that, or come out of touch with what they're originally were trying to say. And it feels like you still have that, your finger on the pulse, you know, your thumb on the pulse of what you're trying to say. And I don't know. I think that's just that's obviously a great thing for an artist, you know, to always be able to find that pulse.
Yeah, thanks. I really worried in the early days about going to the well too many times and drying it out, trying to write when I shouldn't be writing. And I decided back then I'm going to truly do this in cycles. So I wouldn't come off of the road with a few days here and there or whatever, and just go write with somebody. I would go in cycles, because I felt like, or at least I decided that I'm going to go out and live and get input and feed the tank, and then hope that the result is when I go back to the well, there's something there. And I think that, you know, a lot of that comes from being exposed to other art, other writers, other music. Some of it comes from, reading. There's still a lot left to read out there. And some of it is just, taking good care of my brain. I've never had an addictive personality. I don't, drink a lot. I don't do any drugs. And, I try to stay, good and healthy and feed my brain. And because I think that's critical. I think, you have to put stuff into your brain, and then your brain, every time you put something in there, every time you work on a problem, there's physical wiring in the brain. And whenever you're trying to solve a problem, your brain is trying to wire itself to solve that problem for you. And if you'll give it the time, give it some input, it'll do the work. And so the other part of it is, you really do need to know what all has already been said and how it has been said. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to remain original. Mm-hmm. I try not to ever write a line that's, since we're through, or you broke my heart. I mean, there's just certain things that we heard in the 50s, right? And then we heard it in the 60s, and, it was the number one hook in a song. It's okay if it's some line that's buried in there, but if your hook is something that you've heard already too many times, if the basis, the anchor for everything else in the song is something that has already been said that way at least a few times, you're just in trouble. So you have to be aware. You have to be paying attention if you want to be original. It's the number one piece of advice I give to young artists. Know the music that has already come before you so that you don't rewrite it, and, try to make it your own, when the rest of us who've already been around for a while listen to it and say, well, I really liked that when the Eagles did it.
Right. Yeah. I would get you out on this last question. It's kind of one of those things I've always been interested in, is the physical aspect of writing. I guess, how has technology changed the way you write a song? I'm assuming, back then you were doing a whole lot of notebook and pen writing. Have you turned over to the laptop or anything like that, or is it? Yeah. Do you still like the actual
No,
physical?
I still use some paper, but the laptop is open and a USB keyboard is attached. Mm-hmm. I will type out lyrics on the screen, but I'll do something Hayden and I started years ago. We do a bubble sheet, and it's a creative exercise. Take your central idea, write it down, and then keep expanding and spiraling outward from everything that is related to it that you can think of, so that when you get up, to the bottom of the page or 2 pages over, and you look at all the bubbles with words in it, they all somehow, no matter how remote they are to the central idea at that point, they all still relate back to that idea somehow. And then you have this sort of a roadmap to the thinking behind your idea, and the way your brain looked at it anyway, that you can always glance at. It's always there for you, and you don't have to rethink that. And then it becomes a process of trying to construct the lyrics, and that's when you're just playing the chord progression over and over, working the melody and hoping that words fly out of your mouth, each time you go around. And to help with that, I'll take a USB keyboard and peck out a drum pattern and create a loop so that it's almost like playing with a band. and just, get that tempo right and get that groove right and play along with it and hope that words fly out. And then once the song is there and constructed, it'll take days and days for all of that to sort itself out and become satisfactory. I really carve on the melody, usually right up until the last minute, just to keep trying to carve every bit of originality out of it I can. And so, what was the basic melody at the top, even if it's just okay, but I'll know that I know what I'm going to do with this. Because if I'm co-writing, if I'm writing by myself, I don't even give it a second thought. But if I'm writing with someone else, I'll say, I'm going to keep working on this, and sort of establish an understanding that this is our placeholder, and it's only going to get better. So if we like it now, it's really good to go, but it's going to get better. And then the lyrics, I will do the same thing with those and all the days coming, and continually just try to make sure there's no better way, there's no more original way to say that, and keep carving on it. And there are exceptions every now and then, like America, third song on this album, where the album was finished and being mastered, and Steve came over, showed me his new guitar, Steve Warner Gretsch, and I told him the idea I had, and he goes, "Oh, we gotta write that." And I said, "Well, what would we do and musically?" And he goes, "Oh man," he's had his guitar in his hand, and he just started playing this thing, and I started singing, and next thing you know, we're over in front of my laptop, and I'm typing stuff out, and we aren't even halfway through finishing the song, but I know we're going to get there, and I know where it's going, and it has to be on this album. So while we're writing, I'm texting musicians, checking on avails, texting my production assistant, find out if Ricky's available, and when. And so, and the time it took for us to get to the song being pretty much complete in structure and a couple of gaps, but we'll fill them. We had scheduled a session for 4 days later. And so we got the song cut. I got my vocals down, got background singers in, got my slide guitar part on there, gave it to Ricky to start mixing, and jumped on the bus and hit the road to go play in Kansas, and got to the first gig, and bam, the quarantine was there. The lockdown was there. And we didn't have a show that night, and got on the bus and turned around and came home. And so then it was just like mix, hit this thing, finish, my deadline's approaching. I got it in and got it mastered and added to the album on the day of the deadline. And if that had been delayed any more, I wouldn't have made it onto the album. If it had been any slower on getting the recording session done, may not have been able to get the musicians in the room because of the quarantine.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's just it's all the, I guess, like cutting in those margins. Sometimes that's just how it. And
that's one of the few exceptions where I didn't chew and chew and chew. And I still did chew on that song because I had a week to 10 days from from when we started writing it until I had to sing the vocal and commit the lyrics to. There's actually one lyric that when the background singers came over, I had improved on. And before they put their background part on, I ran in there and re-sang the lyric. So it was just the real exception to the amount of time of beating up on the melody and the lyric, and then that slide part, the hook, la, da, 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, man, that's so simple. Is that really mine? Is that original enough? It's too simple. But I don't hear anything else when I hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that's what's so. Well, I guess when you get so far into, like how you were saying just a minute ago about your biggest advice to songwriters is to listen to what's come before you, so it has to be that just as much that when you've recorded a whole lot of music. Am I not just like copying something else from someone else, but am I copying myself even? That's
redoing something I've done.
Yeah. What I find probably the most interesting and like telling in all of that is, you learn that having like a filler is okay, and that like you'll be able to work on that over time, and not necessarily
like
where
a
you have to
placeholder, you mean?
Yeah, like some kind of placeholder. Because like even as a writing journalist, I've come to the point where it's like, don't erase anything, just have it in the margins if you need it, or if you up above or whatever, and you can always go back and change that
edit
before.
yourself.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what, I guess, like you get it in your head that like, all these great artists, they do this in 10 minutes, and that's obviously not the case. It's very, very few and far between where things come together so quickly. It's, it's a lot of work to get that final product. So it's, I don't know. I think that's very telling. So it's very, reassuring for a lot of people too. So,
yeah, if someone is making something look easy, don't let them fool you, because that may look easy and it may even be easy, but the work it took to make it easy for them, we all have to do the work. Yeah. And, especially young kids today, I always said, I wish I could just grab a bus full of, inner city kids, or kids, growing up in poverty, and drive them around some of the more affluent neighborhoods, and show them and point to these houses and these restaurants, nice restaurants in the neighborhood, and all these businesses that are so well adorned and with stone brick entrances and all of that stuff, where they may come from an area where everything just looks like crap and it's run down, and it gives you a feeling of hopelessness, and I want to point at this stuff and say, you can have all of this. Every one of you can have all of this. All you have to do is work your ass off. Mm-hmm. It's like, because none of these people got that by luck. None of these people got that because it just fell into their laps. Nobody out there, with these successful businesses is working less than 18 hours a day. Nobody playing guitar that's just like killing it, got there without practicing for 8 hours a day, at least, for years and years. And so you can have all of that. You can be great at whatever it is you love to do. All you have to do, and this is the funny part, is work your ass off. And if everyone really understood that everything, all your dreams are attainable. Now, there are people that can throw up roadblocks, but for the most part, you can really reach for the stars and get a hold of one if you just work hard enough. And that's really what it takes. And so anybody that thinks like I used to think, when I get a record deal and all of that stuff, man, I'll really be able to have the luxury of time to make an album and work on this and spend, years getting this just right. Well, no, you won't, because you're going to be doing 150 shows on the road, and they're going to drag you off the road for a quick 3-month production of your next album. And you're not going to have that luxury. You're going to be working too hard and doing all of this other stuff. None of what you see, is easy, no matter who you're looking at. You look at all the big stars on tour, there's not a one of them that isn't working their butt off. There's nobody having success in this business or any other business who isn't working their butt off.
Yeah.
Did I say ass earlier? This is a podcast. They're working their asses off. And that's important for kids to know. Eddie Van Halen didn't just come by those licks. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
if you listen to Hell Bent on this record, I figure from the time that we first started playing the track and recording it until the time I delivered it to be mastered, I hit that space bar for listening or recording at least 1,000 times. So what's a 4-minute song times 1,000?
Mm-hmm.
That's minimum. How many minutes went into just the recording and completion of that one song on this record? It's not construction work. I've done that. I know how much harder it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard work, and I'm glad you touched on that, because I think anyone who's trying to do anything out there, to look over and think that Hayden Nicholas, playing that guitar. I made a joke one night after some song that he had just killed, playing the guitar, and we had a real intimate crowd. And I introduced him. I said, he got really lucky on a bunch of those guitar licks just now, didn't he? Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Luck.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where, whenever you get that record deal, or whenever you have that big break, that's not the moment of accomplishment. That's like the beginning almost.
You've been given the big block of granite. Now go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now you're going to start working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Clint, it's been really, really great talking with you today. We'll have to do this sometime again.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I haven't done a lot of. Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't done a lot of podcasts, and it's really fun. We can dig deep on this stuff. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I love talking with people where, there's not that, like so many people you talk with, they're sitting.
Yeah. We'll be right back.
Yeah, with that radio where it's like, can you introduce the next single, and you're not even really able to get deep in the woods there and talk about all the stuff that got you to that point, so that's what I love. And I said, I think people like that too now, it forever, like there was that where you only did listen to those little radio clips or whatever. And that's that, or you saw them in Country Weekly or whatever magazine. And now I think with the podcast setting and being able to really deep dive with artists is it's really, really rewarding on my end. I love talking because at the end of the day, I'm a fan. That's the.
Yeah, we all are. If I could do a podcast with James Taylor, I'd wear him out.
Yeah, well.
Oh, yeah, man. Well, I appreciate your help with the music and all the good things you said.
All right, thanks for listening to New Slang. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Go check out episode sponsors, the Blue Light Live and Wickers Jalapeno Jelly. I hope you all have a safe 4th of July weekend, and we will see you next week.